History of Holland. Holland was founded in 1847 by Albertus van Raalte and a group of 60 Dutch settlers. Matter of fact, where we are standing is the original market plots, 6 acres, where the original city hall and farmers market was, and is still the center of the city. Every summer on Friday nights, there are concerts here with various performers and various bands. Good morning. And even as we stand here, you look across the square, you see the city hall behind you. And to your left behind you on the next corner is the Holland Historical Museum. Raalte came here with 60 of his followers. He originally immigrated to this country to avoid religious persecution. He was a minister, and his ideas as far as how to worship varied with those of the state church. So one of the reasons they immigrated was so they could practice religion as they perceived it to be important, and to do that in freedom with no encroachment on the part of the state. And of course, tulip time is a natural offshoot when you were Dutch. The community was founded in 1847, but tulip time wasn't started until 1929. A local school teacher said, you know, we need to celebrate our Dutch heritage. We are good to go.
We'll see you in a little bit.
Okay, I'm going. And so the community got together and started planting tulip bulbs and had first what they called the Tulip Day in 1929. It has been going continuously ever since, and has become one of the 20 best known international festivals, they tell me, in the world. And we host approximately 500,000 visitors every tulip time. It is interesting to reflect on how tulip time got so well known in such a small town. Well, at one time there was a local company called the Holland Furnace Company. That was a very successful, very prosperous company. That was the world's largest installer of furnaces. And we now think of network television. At that time, they had a weekly network radio program on the CBS radio network that broadcasted throughout the entire country. And during tulip time, they used to bring in the rock stars and the famous actors and actresses at the time to do the broadcast right from the roof of the Warmfriend Hotel right here. And so you had people like Dorothy Lamour, Robert Cummings, Fibber McGee and Molly, Fay Ray and George Raff, right here in Holland, Michigan, broadcasting the tulip time parades to the entire nation. So we talk about downtown Holland. You think back, this hotel was built in 1925, when Holland was a relatively small town. What is a major 6-story hotel doing in a little town like Holland? Well, it was put up by the Holland Furnace Company to house their guests and their salespeople when they came to town. As a matter of fact, I'm told that the hotel lost money Every year it was in operation from 1925 until it was converted to a senior citizens residences in the 1980s and 1990s. Talked about industry a little. The largest industry in Holland during the early years in the late 1800s and early 1900s was the furniture industry. At one time, there are no fewer than 8 different residential furniture manufacturing companies in Holland. And you say, why furniture manufacturing? Well, number one, Michigan was almost entirely a first growth hardwood forest at that time, so you had very inexpensive raw materials. Secondly, you had Dutch craftsmen who enjoyed working in wood and had woodworking skills. I don't know, maybe it came from making wooden shoes for so many hundreds of years. And they were people that took pride in what they did, so they made excellent furniture. And as you look on your left, once we get past the next light, you will see the last standing of those 8 furniture factories. It's now been converted into the Holland Rescue Mission and also condominiums and apartments. It's a building right here on your left. Interestingly enough, all those companies are almost all gone. Matter of fact, the only company making residential furniture in the area anymore is the Howard Miller Clock Company that manufactures both residential furniture and clocks. What happened? Well, we ran out of cheap hardwood. At the same time, with the growth of other industries, and especially automotive manufacturing, which were much higher paying industries, the furniture industry could no longer compete because furniture making is a rather labor intensive product. And so the furniture industry moved south, first of all, for inexpensive wood and inexpensive labor. And now most of your residential furniture is not even manufactured here in the United States. It has migrated offshore to such places as Vietnam, China, and Thailand. But we still do have a very important dimension of furniture making. 3 of the 5 largest office furniture companies in the United States are all located here within a 25-mile radius. And that would be the Hayworth Corporation, located here in Holland, Herman Miller Furniture, and Steelcase, who I am told is not only the largest in the United States, but the largest in the world, and they're located 25 miles away in Grand Rapids. And there are many other institutional office furniture manufacturers as well in the area. And just ahead of you, you've watched a train go by, and I have nothing to tell you about that at all. Yeah. Watch your language. We're on television. Yeah. Oh. Okay. As we get up to the next block, we will be turning the corner here, and we'll be driving down what I like to call Sculpture Boulevard. And on both your left and your right sides, you will find a number of very interesting, brightly painted sculptures. And as we drive down this boulevard, I want you to look at what they are made of and see if you see things that might look like old engine camshafts, old barrels, and truck springs, and things like that. They're coming up right here on your left on both sides of the street.
What is this up here? Business or
Okay, they're asking what the business is up here. That is the Louis Padnes Company, which is a recycling company of scrap metals and scrap plastic. Okay, here we are. Do you see some old camshafts there, camshafts on the right, some barrels. Well, the Louis Padnes Company is one of the largest recyclers of scrap materials in the state of Michigan. One of the owners in his retirement was walking through the yard. Who knows, he might have been walking right through there where we looked in. And he said, that looks like it could be a sculpture. And so in his retirement, he became a sculptor of sorts with some of these very, very interesting sculptures. Even a dog on a doghouse guarding the scrapyard. Most appropriately named on the right, Rusty. Coming back to the history of Holland, when Van Rolte arrived in late 1846, he was originally on his way to Wisconsin, but he found this site with the water and said, this is where I want to settle with my people. And that first winter was a very hard winter. I am told that the death rate was so high that one of the first buildings they built was an orphanage, because over 50% of those settlers died that first year.
How many people came with him?
The people who came with it.
How many?
There were 60 people in all, and they are soon joined by many others. But the good news is that they never had to use the orphanage as an orphanage. The community opened their arms to these children, and they're all incorporated in the remaining families. Again, that strong sense of community that came from the very beginning. We are now approaching the eastern end of Lake Macatawa, which is a lake that runs 7 miles from east to west and opens onto Lake Michigan. As we look down the lake here, you will see a lot of very lovely homes. And one of the questions that was once asked on the tour, and that is, what does it cost to live on Lake Macatawa? Well, I'll give you an idea. They talk about lots in terms of a front foot, which is 1 foot wide on the lake itself. Now, you probably would like at least 100 feet. And so you take that 100-foot wide lot and you multiply that by $5,000 or $6,000 a foot. So you have a lot that runs $500,000 to $600,000. And oh, by the way, then you have to build a home on it. So I hope you saved a little money. But you know what?
What's your tax rate? I couldn't afford it.
Yeah. That is a bargain. If instead you want to live on Lake Michigan, it's $10 a front foot. So if you want a 100-foot lot, you are looking at $1 million. And of course, when you have $1 million lot, you probably aren't going to put a $20,000 home on it either. Anyway, as you look down the lake here, you look straight west about 7 miles, and that is where the lake empties into Lake Michigan. And is also the route that Van Rolte and his followers took when they settled here in Holland. You know, you're assuming they came by car, I'm sure, or at least by railroad. Well, they didn't even have roads. Everything, most transportation was by boat. So they came via Lake Michigan, and they got to the harbor mouth, and you think, oh, there was a channel there, wasn't there? No, there was a sandbar. So everything that came into the community had to be unloaded from boats onto the sandbar, reloaded the smaller boats, and taken 6 miles up to this area where the city was originally started. Matter of fact, we talk about the industriousness of the original settlers. They eventually dug their own channel by hand, one shovel at a time, and maintained it themselves for many years until the federal government finally put in, you know, the extensive system we have now.
Well, what month of the year did they arrive? Did they not have time
Okay,
to?
Van Rolte originally arrived in November. Yeah, it's, you know,
Not
he was
too much time to build a house.
he was obviously not a snowbird, right? And his settlers followed shortly after that. And one of the reasons that they experienced such hardship is these were not people who were necessarily skilled and accustomed to farming and outdoor work. I mean, these might have been people who had been townspeople all their lives. So you can imagine the challenges of coming and finding this heavily forested site that had to, all the trees had not only to be cut down, but the stumps had to be cleared out so that they could do any farming.
And they had to hunt for food.
And hunting for food as well. So I would like to speculate they learned a whole new set of skills very rapidly, or they didn't last very long. Now, we talked about Van Rolte and the settlers landing in this area. You'll see straight ahead of us a wonderful sculpture of a family, a Dutch family, that might have been one of those original 60 settlers dressed in period costumes. And to the left you see the outline of a ship that was reminiscent of the ship that carried them across the Atlantic. So they landed in this area, and along where you see the Heinz building as well. This also happened to be where the Ottawa tribe of Indians was living. And they had purchased their land from the federal government and had lived here for many years. But the Ottawa Indians were the first snowbirds, but they did it in reverse. They came here to live in the winter. During the summer, they moved further north to the Harbor Springs, Petoskey area because the hunting and the fishing was much better up there. So they summered up north, and for them, Holland was down south for the winter months. Well, the Dutch, many who arrived during that summer, assumed that these Indians had migrated north and were no longer going to live in Holland. So they took many of the things that were left behind, like tent poles and a number of other things, used them as firewood, used them incorporating their own buildings. And much to their surprise and dismay, the original residents came back in October wondering where all their possessions were. So again, just another example of the mixing of cultures and how important it is to communicate when you have diversity. They compensated the Indians, and the Indians settled elsewhere in Michigan. But you notice I pointed out the H.J. Heinz plant. That's one of our oldest industries. H.J. Heinz himself came to Holland in the late 1800s and said to the local farmers, now if you will contract to grow X number of acres of cucumbers, I will build a pickle processing plant here. And this plant now not only processes all of Heinz pickles, it also makes Heinz Worcestershire sauce, a number of their other products such as their Jack Daniel's barbecue sauce and vinegar. Employs about 260 people year round, and that's doubled during the green season in Holland, when they hire about 200 college students. Now, as you well know, pickle processing has a distinctive odor to it that permeates the area. I had a friend who dated a girl who worked there during the summer to pay her way through college. And she said, you know, I'd come home from the night shift and I'd take a shower, and I'd take another shower, and I'd take another shower, and there was no way that I could get rid of the smell. To which her boyfriend turned to me and said, Phil, you have no idea what it's like to kiss a pickle. The good news is that they've been happily married for 40-some years. Now, this intersection later in the week is part of 6 miles of Tulip Lanes that you will want to drive through. And I promise you that each day we will have more and more tulips in bloom. I want to especially point out those few that are, yeah, there's one, and there's 6 more. Now there are white ones. I want you to take a good look at them. Close your eyes very tightly. Are you all squinting? Think Technicolor, because that's what it will be. We do our best to welcome you, but we do not have any hotlines that control the weather here. But we do plant 6 different varieties of tulips, some of them early blooming, some of them late blooming, so there's diversity. Here we are coming to the Cappon house, which is an example of not only an outstanding museum, it is really very authentic to its period. It was the finest home in Holland, and they say in Western Michigan, when it was built in 1874 by Isaac Cappon, who is Holland's leading and a very energetic citizen. He owned its largest industry, and he also had a family of 11 children, at which point his wife died. Figures, doesn't it? He proceeded to marry his housekeeper, to much conversation you can imagine in a small town, and had 5 more children. Now, even with my trouble with math, I come up with 16 children. Seems to me it gives a whole new definition to the word energetic, don't you think? Anyway, why is there such an authentic home here? Some of the original colors, much of the original furniture. It has one of the finest displays of quality West Michigan furniture anywhere. It was because 2 of his youngest daughters never married. They were born in this house, they lived there their entire lives, and died in this house. The net result is there was very little change to the original house. So when they died in 1980, we had this wonderful historic structure. And around the corner you have the Settlers house, which is a great example of the type of home that a modest working man's family would have lived in the 1850s. Much as I hate to lose any of you, you're a wonderful audience. I do encourage you to get off. It is a part of your ticket. Or if you're going to be here for a few days, you may want to drive back and spend more time here, because those white tickets enable you to get into here anytime during the week. Go around the corner.
I have a question.
Yes.
You said the two daughters were still alive. What year did the last one die?
The city received the house in 1980, so it was in that approximate period,
Okay,
right
so it was a
there.
much more modern time.
Yeah. Okay,
So
on
it was
our
obviously
right
the youngest one.
is the Settlers house. The Settlers house was not built at this site. It was moved here to be in close proximity to the museum. But this would be a typical residence in the 1850s and 1860s, just one step above a log cabin. If you looked in the backyard, you saw the outhouse. And so that would be a very typical residence in Holland at that point in time. This particular one was one of the few homes that survived Holland's fire of 1871. Now, we talked about Isaac Cappon being Holland's first mayor. He was also Holland's leading citizen from the standpoint of he owned the largest manufacturing company in Holland. It was located in this site right here, on this block right here, the Cappon and Birch Tannery. At that time, Holland was a town of less than 5,000 people, and his tannery employed 410 people at its peak. So he employed almost 10% of the entire population of the city. No wonder they elected him mayor. Also want to mention market plots is set up in that area right there during the week. I don't know whether it's open today, but it will be the rest of the week, where you can enjoy authentic Dutch baked goods and typical Dutch foods, fine Dutch crafts, and gifts along the way. Also have some they have some bleachers for convenient viewing of the parades. We're now coming into the Holland's Historic District, where you're seeing some of Holland's oldest homes and also some of Holland's finest homes during that period. On your right-hand side, I want to point out Third Reformed Church here. Look at the size. The Cappon house cost $10,000 to build in 1874. This church was rebuilt in 1874. That also cost $10,000. So it appears that if you had $10,000, you had your choice of a nice 5-bedroom home or an immense church. Which one do you think was a better value?
Well, they probably got a lot of volunteer labor.
Good observation. See, she's picking up on my theme of volunteerism in Holland here. That's not the original church. The original church was burned down in 1871. I'm going to guess that most of you have heard of the Chicago fire of 1871 and Mrs. O'Leary's cow who kicked over the lantern that started the straw that burned down the city of Chicago. Well, on that same day, the city of Holland had a fire like the Chicago fire. They tell me that if you looked across the lake, and Chicago's only 90 miles away as a crow flies or less, you could see the illumination in the sky from the Chicago fire. And somebody once suggested that it was probably the sparks from the Chicago fire that blew across the lake and started the Holland fire. I think that makes for a good story. The truth is that some of the local farmers were burning some of their brush, and it was a day with a high wind. But it burned 80% of the city. And it happened, this 80% of the city burned within a period of 2 hours. So the residents, many of them didn't even have an opportunity to move their valued possessions out of the way of harm. Some of them took some of their smaller possessions and were able to bury them in the sand and protect them that way. But as is true of all survivors, they recovered and built back bigger and better than ever. Which leads me to a conversation on the city and immigration here in Holland, Michigan. For many years, we were a very homogeneous Dutch community, and it was a good place to raise a family, but it was pretty boring. It was so conservative that if you needed gas in your car, you'd better gas up on Saturday night, because on Sunday you might not find a gas station open in Holland. And by the way, you didn't ever mow your lawn on Sunday. And there were signs on the tennis courts that said no tennis playing on Sunday. We have a gentleman here who said, yeah, you didn't mow your lawn on Sunday because that was working and you didn't work on the 7th day of the week. Well, I like to say we have gone from being the end of the earth to the center of the earth. Over the years, we have had 2 additional waves of immigration. The area has a strong agricultural industry, which attracted a substantial number of Hispanic people who came as migrant workers during the 40s and the 50s. And they said, this looks like a good place to live. Let me interrupt our conversation by pointing out the 4 homes here on the left. Note the distinctive orange-red brick that's known as Venekozen brick that came from a local brickyard, and you'll find many of the older homes and commercial buildings in the community built of that.
They're identical, right?
These were built as rental homes. But you talk about quality, look at the beveled corner, the arches over the windows. Only in Holland would they build rental properties with that attention to detail and quality. But getting back to my story, the Hispanic community settled here in the 50s, and they brought a sense of fun and a sense of knowing how to live, a love of color, and an energy to the city, and had the same kind of work ethic that the Dutch had and fit in very well. The next wave of immigrants came in the 70s, and Holland is known as a city of churches, and the majority of these churches sponsored Vietnamese and Laotian refugee families. And as you go around the town, you'll find that many of the newest small and oftentimes residential businesses have been started by these immigrants that immigrated from Asia during that period. So it is the diversity, the seasoning that each new wave of immigrants brings to this community that makes it a better place. We're now approaching Western Seminary. I'd like to point out the apartment building here on the left called the Friendship House. Western Seminary was originally founded to train ministers for the Reformed Church, which was the Dutch denomination of Albertus van Rolte. But it is a unique place in that it is a seminary that not only preaches and teaches, but it practices what it preaches. That home is designed, though each of those apartments house young, developmentally handicapped adults who live with seminary students. The concept is to enable these young adults to evolve into being able to live independently as adults. But I'm not so sure that there isn't even more benefit to the seminary students who learn about people who are not like they are and prepare them better to go into a career of service as a ministry is. Next, any weekday, if you want to go through those doors behind you with the pillars on the left, and you are indigent, you are treated to a free meal any weekday noon, joining the seminary community. And they serve approximately 200 people from the community each weekday throughout the year. The seminary is also a very innovative place.
Fraternity?
On your right is a fraternity house. And we are now entering into Hope College. Hope College is a liberal arts college of approximately 3,200 students, very highly regarded. U.S. News and World Report, which is one of the definitive college guides, ranks it as one of the top 100 liberal arts colleges in the country. It's known particularly for its strength in the sciences, and it has a program of undergraduate research that involves no fewer than 50 professors and 150 students doing summer research together in many areas. In the sciences, it graduates more science majors that go on to get PhDs in the sciences per capita than any other college in the United States. As we're coming along Columbia Avenue here, on your left you'll see the Student Center, followed on your right by the Martha Miller Center for International Studies. And I'd like to point out the flags that are along this side and the other side of the Martha Miller Center. It's the International Student Center for the college, and each one of those flags represents a different country that current Hope students are coming from. And it's just one of the ways that they encourage it. Again, the correct title is the Martha Miller Center for International Education, but leave it to the students to shorten it down and get it right. They simply call it the Martha. Next on your right is a new concert hall that is going up. Will also house the music department. And you'll notice the massive poured concrete. Almost looks overbuilt, even for a concert hall. Well, it is. About 100 feet behind the concert hall is the railroad tracks with a string of 100-car freight trains going back and forth. And as you can imagine, freight train whistles and classical concerts don't mix very well. So they have been very intentional on making it very soundproof. So you probably won't have to hear the train whistles, but I'm sure you'll be able to feel the locomotive pounding by. Talked about industry, we talked about Cappon's cannery, we talked about the furniture industry. What are the major industries in Holland today? Well, first of all, if your car has a passenger visor that flips up and has an illuminated mirror, that was invented in Holland by the Prince Corporation. If you go home and look at a clock on your wall, at one time there were 5 different clock companies in the area. The only one left is the Howard Miller Clock Company in Zealand. If your car has a remote garage opener in the roof, that was manufactured here in Holland. If you are a member of Sam's Club or Costco and you buy some of those prepared foods in the frozen food section, there's a good chance they came from Request Foods here in Holland. You go to the supermarket deli counter and you see boar's head cheeses and meats. They have a major plant here in Holland. On your right, we have the Padnes Center for Transportation. You may have noticed another one of Mr. Padnes' sculptures there on the right. And that is where the train stops and the buses stop, and that was given by the Padnes family. We're now approaching Windmill Island Gardens. And as you approach, as you look to your left, you will see the only authentic Dutch windmill in the United States. Now, as you look at it across the ponds here, you say, that's a nice looking, modest windmill there. Well, distances are deceiving. That windmill is 125 feet tall. And as you look at the blades on the windmill, each pair of blades on that windmill, which you figure must be made out of balsa wood or something very light, each pair of those blades weighs over 3 tons. So as you see the windmill operating and revolving, that represents almost 7 tons of blades. Now the Dutch are very fond of their 900 windmills that are still in the Netherlands, and they are not quick to part with one. As a matter of fact, it took 10 years of negotiation to convince them to part with one windmill to share with their Dutch brothers and sisters here in Holland, Michigan. And that windmill was disassembled brick by brick and board by board and reassembled here in Holland, Michigan. But it's not only a part of Dutch history, you're also going to find evidence of some of the very significant European history. If you look carefully, you will see the bullet holes in marks in the wood and on the bricks from the battles of World War II that were fought in the Netherlands. I am told that it was a place where at least once it concealed Dutch resistance fighters. But you notice I will tell you that I am told that, which means that I do not make that a guarantee. It may just be a story. This is not only a windmill, but it's a wonderful place to get out and walk around. It has, for young people, a restored carousel, has Dutch shops and authentic Dutch village reproduction, along with bridge and canals, wonderful tulip plantings. And there are tours of the windmill. The windmill actually grinds grain. So you can purchase flour that was ground here in the windmill. And I'm told it's a tremendous bargain because they tell me it costs more to grind it than they charge to sell it to you for. So. And there are trolleys that come along every 15 minutes, so you have plenty of time to get off. You can either do it, pardon?
Pick it up here.
And you can pick it up right here. And you can either do that, or if you're going to be here for a few days, you may choose to come back by car. The tickets you received when you got your armbands have stubs on them that permit you to get in anytime throughout the week. In addition to an excellent public school system, There are also a substantial number of charter schools, and there is not one, not two, but 3 parochial school systems. Pardon?
Good.
Oh, okay.
We're both
You're-
parochial school students.
And as a matter of fact, we will pass an anchor at Hope College. And below it is a quote from Albertus Finralti that says, "This anchor is my hope for the future of these people." And Hope College, known as, it was really a high school at that time, was started in 1851, at a time when they were still building log cabins to house people. But that was their continuing commitment to education. Holland is also a very popular place to retire in. Matter of fact, Money Magazine identified it as one of the 5 best small cities in the country to retire in. Now you're probably scratching your head and say, why would somebody retire in a community that got 150 inches of snow this past winter? Well, there are a lot of other things that make for a good life, and living in Holland is a wonderful life. One of them is facilities. On your right, you see Freedom Village, which is a retirement community with shops, beauty shop, barber shop, and several hundred very high quality apartments with a continuum of care for the rest of one's life. I pointed out the Warm Friend Hotel, which is a senior living community. There are excellent medical facilities in the area, but it's the other things, the cultural life, the community life. The college has a substantial number of lectures, concerts, music throughout the year, an outstanding athletic program. Matter of fact, if you're considering moving to Holland in your retirement and taking in the Hope College basketball games, you need to put your name on the waiting list now. Because with a basketball facility that seats approximately 3,000 people, there is a waiting list of up to 2 years to buy season tickets. But you also find that many people who perhaps came here originally to go to school come back here and retire in this community. And they too add to both its diversity and the quality of community. They are some of our best volunteers. Matter of fact, the majority of the people that are Tulip Time Trolley guides are retirees that have come from Freedom Village here. We are coming around, and on our right, we'll be stopping at the City Tulip Gardens, which will have some wonderful photo opportunities for you. It'll be interesting. We've been doing these tours for several days now, and from day to day, I see many more tulips opening up. Matter of fact, there are even more tulips that have opened up now than were open on my first tour this morning. We'll be stopping here for about 5 minutes, and you do need to get back on this bus, and I think we'll ring the bell when we need for you to come back in if you'd like to get out and walk around. We are going to be going back down, crossing 8th Street, which is the downtown area. And it's a very dynamic downtown area. Interestingly enough, that is very much the exception rather than the rule in small cities throughout the United States. where a mall will come in and it will really replace the downtown stores. Well, we had a similar situation in Holland in the late 1980s. But the community leaders said, this is not going to happen to us. We had a couple who had a major industry in Holland, the Prince Corporation, Elsa and Ed Prince, said, we are going to address this. What happened is we wound up with a downtown in which it doesn't snow. Now, you look at that a little skeptically, and of course it does snow in downtown Holland, but there are laid under the streets and sidewalks of all of downtown Holland 125 miles of pipe. Just like this. And here are some photographs of what was done. And what we do is
the street?
That's
Parkway or something.
the park, yeah, was. And that is, see, there are pipes under all this area right here. And it uses the waste heat from generating electric power.
Waste heat.
And so in downtown Holland during the winter, you have almost as much traffic because it's a wonderful place to jog. It's a wonderful place to walk your children and your pets. And again, there's a lot of excellent restaurants. There's a good Irish pub. The New Holland Brewery is an excellent place here across the corner. We even have our own fireplace here. I suspect that they put it there so that the ice cream cone store next door could sell ice cream during January and February. We're now approaching the old pillar church. This magnificent white clapboard church on the right as we get across the intersection here. And I want you to, if you look up at the top of the church, the weather vane has a rooster on it, which is symbolic of the biblical story of Peter and the cock shall crow thrice before, you know.
I know that.
So, and that is there. And admire the handsome Greek columns here. Now, again, to put in perspective, this church was built in 1851 in a community that was started just 4 years earlier. And look carefully at those pillars. You can see horizontal lines about every 36 inches. And you see these as being these handsome, solid wood pillars. Well, I'm going to let you in on a little secret. They are barrels. The local barrel maker and carpenter, who is skilled in building barrels, built those columns one barrel on top of another. During the week, downstairs, there are a lot of historical Dutch artifacts that you may want to walk through and see it.
So is that open for tourists?
And that is open weekdays every day. You know, these Dutch services were no small thing. Originally, they ran 3 hours in the morning, and sometimes they had an afternoon service as well. I don't know about you, but I have a little trouble after 45 minutes staying awake. And they dealt with it by putting the women and children on one side and the men on the other. And the other thing they did is the women generally had rolled up in their kerchiefs in their pockets these strong Dutch peppermints that they gave to the children midway through the service. And now you've been with me for almost that long, and so I want to make sure that I hold your complete attention, so I have a nice Dutch peppermint for each of you as well. Now, we are again coming, seeing Hope College. I don't believe, did anybody in the previous part of the tour talk about the Vanaclausen brick? Okay, we covered that, right. All right. And you'll notice, take a look on your left here, there are some other examples of that. We talked a little bit about Hope College. And some of the other things that are significant about this college is it has some very highly regarded professors. The best-selling college psychology textbook was written by a Hope College psychology professor by the name of Dave Myers. Several of the English professors have had books that have made the New York Times best-selling book list. The most recent one would have been by Heather Sellers, entitled The Mennonite in the Little Black Dress. I graduated from Hope College in 1965. Went back and just checked to see how much my tuition was. It was $950, not a semester, for the entire year. Now, tuition and adding board and room and books to that is approaching $39,000 a year. When I went to school working summers, vacations, and part-time, I could almost pay my college tuition. I don't know any summer jobs that pay $39,000, do you? Okay.
Some daddies even have a hard time paying it.
That's right, yeah. and Daddy also said, as long as I'm paying part of your college tuition, you will work vacations and summers too. Again, we're coming back around to Centennial Park. Directly ahead of you there is the Holland Historical Trust Museum, another interesting place as far as things to do. And like to stop